What's up, all my movie-loving maniacs? It's your boy Bangful B of the Lassiter Factor. And with the release of Thunderbolts, which comes out this weekend on the day of my birthday, so yay me, I wanted to take a moment to stop and rank every theatrically released comic book or superhero movie that came out during the 2020s so far. But before I get started, let me clear some things up. When I say of the 2020s so far, I'm talking between that 2020 and 2024 period. So which means Captain America Brave New World will not be on this list because it came out earlier this year, 2025, and at the time when I'm recording this video, I have not yet seen Thunderbolts. And like I said, I am sticking to theatrically released comic book and superhero movies, so nothing that went to streaming, so which means you won't see the Old Guard or Samaritan or any other superhero comic book movie that went to streaming on this list, with the exception of one, and you will know what that is once I get near the end of this ranking. And lastly, in this video, I'm only going to give you my 33 through 16, and I will give you my 15 to number 1 tomorrow, so stay tuned for that. But for right now, let's get into it. Coming in at number 33 is Morbius. A lot of people have another movie over this movie as the worst, and I'll get into that in a little bit. But to me, this is worse than that other movie because this has so much potential, and yet I walked away disappointed. Sony really thought that because of all the memes that people actually liked this movie to the point where they wanted to re-release this. At number 32 is Madam Web. What can I say about this movie that hasn't been said? It's my worst movie of 2024. At number 31 is The Crow, which came out last year. It is a remake or reboot of the 1994 movie with Brandon Lee, which I did watch for the first time. And even though I didn't expect this movie to be as good as that movie, it still doesn't change the fact that this movie was complete garbage. All due respect to Bill Skarsgård, he is a good actor, but he is no Brandon Lee. At number 30 is Aquaman: The Lost Kingdom. Not only this was a disappointing follow-up to that first film, which I wasn't a huge fan of in the first place, but it was the final film of the DC Extended Universe and went out on a bit of a whimper. It was a disappointing and abrupt way to end the DCEU. At 29 is The New Mutants. Y'all remember this movie? No, neither did I at first. I remember this came out during the pandemic when movie theaters were starting to open up, and this was one of those first movies that I did see post the pandemic, and I give the movie credit for being ambitious, but overall this was not a good entry into the X-Men franchise. At number 28 is Wonder Woman 1984, which was a huge disappointment compared to that first film. I understand this movie wanted to be a little bit more on the lighter side. Patty Jenkins, she wanted to harken back to the Christopher Reeve Superman movies with this, but it just didn't work here. At number 27 is Bloodshot. Y'all remember this one? Y'all don't? Well, I do. I remember this was also one of those movies that came out pre-pandemic, like right around the corner from the pandemic. And I thought it was a fun movie overall, but it's nothing really special. And I do remember Vin Diesel actually wanted to make a cinematic universe out of this, which clearly didn't happen. At 26 is Venom, Let There Be Carnage, which I actually like this movie more than a lot of people, which I know is a controversial take, but hey, what can I say? I always wanted to see Venom fight Carnage. But outside of that, this movie was a mess. It was a lot more comedic than the first film, which I wasn't a huge fan of in the first place. But it still has its moments. At 25 is Kraven the Hunter, which is the last film that was a part of the Spider-Man-less Sony universe movies. Just like Morbius, I also had a lot of high hopes for this, and I believe it was rated R, I don't remember. Like I said, I had a lot of high hopes for this, but it ended up being another disappointing mess to the point where Sony basically came in and just pulled the plug on these movies. Thank God. At number 24 is Joker Folie à Deux. I really like that first Joker movie, so what the fuck happened here? I don't know. Well, I can tell you what happened. They made a musical, which on paper is very ambitious, and under the right circumstances, it could have worked, but it just didn't work here. And Lady Gaga, to her credit, I thought she was a fine Harley Quinn, and Joaquin Phoenix, he slipped right back into his shoes as Arthur Fleck, aka Joker, but overall, this was still a disappointing movie, and it doesn't help that Todd Phillips, the director of this movie, basically used this movie to denounce the success of that first movie. At number 23 is Venom: The Last Dance, which I actually quite enjoyed. Still don't think it's as good as it could be, but I'm just saying, to me, it's the best of the bad bunch as far as the three Venom movies go. Coming in at number 22 is Shazam: Fury of the Gods, which I don't think it's as bad as everyone makes it out to be, but at the same time, it was still a bit of a convoluted mess. I remember this was the first of that last batch of DCEU movies that came out, and it was basically the first sign that the DCEU was basically digging his grave. At 21 is Thor: Love and Thunder, which to me probably is the worst of the Thor movies. They brought back Taika Waititi, which on paper could have worked because he made Thor Ragnarok, which in my opinion is the best of the Thor movies, but everything that made Thor Ragnarok good, he just doubled down here, and it ultimately ruined this movie. Seriously, how do you waste Christian Bale as the villain of this movie? But you know what villain was also a waste? Kang the Conqueror in Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania, which clocks in at number 20. As the third Ant-Man movie, it was disappointing, it was a huge CGI mess, and maybe if things had turned out a lot differently as far as Jonathan Majors' legal troubles, maybe they could have turned the tide on Kang the Conqueror being the next big bad of the Marvel Cinematic Universe after Thanos. But because they are not, and if this movie was better received, they decided to pivot away from Kang. Seriously, Kang is supposed to be your Thanos-level villain, and he got his ass whooped by Ant-Man, the runt of the Avengers. Who wrote this shit? And number 19 is The Marvels, which I enjoyed a lot more than most people did. Don't even think it's as bad as people make it out to be, but at the same time, it still wasn't as good as it could have been. I do enjoy the three ladies in this role, particularly Miss Marvel, and under better circumstances, this movie could have worked. At number 18 is Black Widow, which at the time when I'm recording this video, I did rewatch last week to prep for Thunderbolts. And at the time when I saw it back in the theater, I thought it was just meh, but upon reflection and rewatching, I think it's a lot better than people give it credit for. I like that this movie was willing to go to some dark places, well, at least until they will start things and themes got undercut by that same MCU humor that has been a detriment to the MCU. But Scarlett Johansson still kicks ass as Black Widow, and I like that this movie introduces some new characters that will become relevant in movies going forward. At number 17 is The Kingsman, which is a prequel to the first two Kingsman movies. I know some people didn't really enjoy this movie. I kind of did. I didn't enjoy it as much as the first two films, but I think it's a worthy entry into the Kingsman franchise. Plus, I just like how this was a nice little movie that shows how the Kingsman organization got started. At number 16 is The Flash, which is probably one of the most controversial movies within the past few years, mainly because of its star. But for what it's worth, I thought it was an okay Flash movie. It was cool seeing Michael Keaton suit up as Batman again, or at least one last time. And this is yet another one of those movies where, under better circumstances, this movie could have worked. But this movie just turned out to be a further indicator as to the DCEU just digging its grave. Plus, this movie also could have been a good send-off for the DCEU, but it turned out to not be that. And plus the multiverse aspect, which at the point when this movie came out was starting to get played out, and all the CGI in this movie didn't help this movie at all. But that's my 33 through 16 ranking of comic book and superhero movies of the 2020s so far. Stay tuned tomorrow on my birthday for my 15 to 1. And also let me know what you think of this ranking so far. Do you agree? Do you disagree? Let me know in the comment section below. This is your boy Bankful B of the Lassiter Factor. Stay safe, wash your hands, peace.